My name is Ethan, and I am a logistics officer in the United States Marine Corps. My job requires me to be deployed for long stretches, sometimes 6 to 7 months a year, often in remote locations where communication is limited and the daily demands are rigorous. It's a lifestyle that is not easy, but it's one that I've come to accept. But what made it all worth it was the life I built back home with Emily. Emily was a teacher at a local high school when we met at a mutual friend's cookout in 2014. I had been stationed at a base not far from the city, and a friend of mine invited me to join a small gathering. I wasn't expecting to meet anyone special that evening, but there she was. Emily was a breath of fresh air in a world that often felt heavy and rigid with the rules and structure of military life. She was witty, independent, and had a sharp sense of humor. But more than anything, she was genuine. Unlike the women I had dated before, many of whom were drawn to the idea of being married to a military man for the perks and benefits that came with it. We connected immediately. As we spoke, I found myself sharing details of my life that I typically kept to myself. She wasn't just interested in my job or the typical questions about what it's like to serve in the military. Instead, she was curious about me, about my values, my thoughts on life. That first night, I realized she wasn't like anyone else I had met. She understood the unique challenges of the military lifestyle, partly because her father had served in the Air Force for over 25 years. She wasn't intimidated by the long hours, the deployments, or the uncertainty of the future. She didn't see my career as an obstacle to a relationship. Instead, she embraced it with understanding. As we got to know each other over the next few years, I found myself falling for her. Emily was self-sufficient and had her own life, her own career, and her own set of goals. She wasn't someone who was relying on me for her happiness or stability. I admired that about her, especially when I was away for months at a time. She had her own passions: teaching, traveling, spending time with her close-knit group of friends, all of whom were supportive of her. At the same time, Emily was proud of my service. She respected what I did, but never treated me as a hero. She treated me as Ethan, the man she loved, not as a soldier. We got married after 4 years of dating. I remember our wedding day like it was yesterday. The ceremony was simple, but full of warmth. My family, who had always been supportive of my military service, embraced her with open arms. Emily's father, a man of few words but immense respect, gave me a firm handshake and welcomed me into the family. He understood the sacrifices I made, having lived through the same challenges with his own service. It was clear from the start that we both had an understanding of the commitment we were making. The first few years of marriage were perfect, or so I thought. Emily and I had a rhythm, a routine. She was always supportive of my job and understood that my time away wasn't something I could control. When I was home, we made the most of it, filling the time with little adventures, quiet nights at home, and long talks. When I was away, Emily stayed busy with her teaching job, kept up with her hobbies, and maintained a solid social life. We stayed in touch regularly: daily video calls, texts, care packages sent back and forth, all small ways we kept our bond strong. I made sure that Emily had everything she needed. I bought her a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a suburban neighborhood, close to her school, with a yard for her to relax in. I replaced her car every few years to make sure she had a reliable vehicle. When I wasn't around, I made sure to check in on everything, handling the finances, and ensuring she didn't have to worry about anything. Emily loved the stability, and I loved knowing that she was well taken care of. I thought we were building something solid, something that would last. We had talked about having children, but we both agreed to wait until I could get a desk job, one that would allow me to be home more often. Emily didn't want to raise children on her own while I was deployed. We made plans for the future, even though I couldn't promise when I'd be home for good. I knew that once I was in a position to spend more time with her, we could start a family. The idea of children was always present in our conversations, but never rushed. I respected her decision, and it seemed like we had all the time in the world to figure it out. I thought we were on the same page. We were partners, building a life together with shared goals. But over time, I began to notice things, small things at first, that made me wonder if everything was as perfect as I believed. As the months passed, I started to notice subtle shifts in Emily's behavior. At first, they were so small that I could easily explain them away. Little changes that seemed like nothing more than her adjusting to the rhythm of our lives. But looking back, those small shifts were the first signs that things were unraveling. The first change I noticed was her growing interest in her appearance. Emily had always taken care of herself, but it was different now. She started going to the gym more frequently, and soon after, she hired a personal trainer. I remember the first time she mentioned it to me, casually dropping it into one of our video calls. "I feel like it's time to push myself," she said with a smile, her voice light and airy. I thought it was just her being proactive, trying to keep healthy while I was away. After all, I had always admired her strength and independence. But things didn't stop there. Emily began spending more time with a new group of people, friends who were all single or recently divorced. These women were nothing like the ones she had hung out with before. They were more carefree, more outspoken about their desires and needs, and they seemed to enjoy living a more spontaneous lifestyle. Emily started spending weekends out with them, going to upscale restaurants, dancing at clubs, and attending parties. It wasn't unusual for Emily to go out with friends, but these new outings felt different. She had always been the type to enjoy quieter nights at home with me when I was around. Now, I was seeing her post pictures of herself in high-end restaurants, laughing and enjoying life in a way I hadn't seen before. I started to wonder if I was just overthinking things. Perhaps it was just a phase. After all, Emily had been through a lot with my deployments, and it seemed like she was finding a way to handle the long stretches of being apart. But the more I saw, the more I realized that something was changing in her, and not just her appearance or her social circle. There was a distance growing between us, a gap that I couldn't explain. One evening, just before I left for another deployment, Emily sat me down for one of our regular conversations. We had been discussing the usual, my schedule, her plans for the next few months. But there was a heaviness in the air that I couldn't quite place. She was unusually quiet, as if she had something weighing on her mind. Then, without warning, she said it. "I think we need to open up our marriage," she said, her voice calm but firm. At first, I thought I had misunderstood. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to make sense of her words. Emily sighed, looking down at her hands before meeting my eyes. "I've been thinking about it for a while now, Ethan," she began. "I know you love me, and I love you, but I need something more than what we've been doing. I can't keep going on like this, being lonely all the time while you're deployed. You're gone for months, and I feel like I'm missing out on things. On life. I need to feel connected to someone in a way that we can't right now." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I was speechless, not sure if I had heard her right. I thought she was joking, but the seriousness in her tone made it clear that she wasn't. "Emily," I said slowly, trying to wrap my mind around what she was suggesting. "You want to sleep with other people while we're still married?" She looked at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. "It's not about wanting to leave you, Ethan. It's about fulfilling needs that I have. I don't want to hurt you, but I need to feel more connected to someone. We've been apart for so long, and I can't just wait around. I'm not saying this has to be forever, but I just think it's something we need to consider." I was stunned. I had always trusted Emily, always believed that our bond was strong enough to withstand the challenges of military life. But now, I felt as if everything we had built together was being shattered in an instant. I tried to remain calm, my mind racing as I processed her words. "But we've always known this was part of the deal," I said, my voice shaky. "You knew my job meant long periods of being away. We agreed on this when we got married, so why now? Why would you ask for this now?" She looked away for a moment, as if collecting her thoughts. "I thought I could handle it, Ethan. I really did. But the truth is, I can't keep living this way. I love you, but I can't ignore my own needs anymore. You're always away, and when you're home, I'm constantly waiting for you to leave again. I don't want to live like that anymore." Her words felt like a betrayal. How could she ask this of me? How could she disregard everything we had promised each other? I took a deep breath and tried to compose myself. "I don't know if I can accept this, Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think I can live with knowing that you're with someone else while I'm gone. I don't think I can be in a marriage like that." She reached out to me, her expression softening. "Please understand, Ethan. This isn't about love. It's about me feeling whole, feeling connected. And I don't want you to think that I'm asking you to change. I just need this. We can still be together, but I need to find fulfillment in other ways when you're away." I stood up from the couch, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I couldn't process this. I didn't know what to say. My heart was breaking, and all I could think was that everything I had worked for was slipping away. "I need some time to think," I said finally, my voice shaky but firm. "I can't just make a decision like this. You need to understand how serious this is." The days that followed were a blur of confusion and anger. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept circling back to Emily's proposal. I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had believed in, our vows, our commitment, our future, had been thrown out the window in an instant. How could she want this? How could she want to change everything about our marriage? I didn't understand her reasoning. She loved me, but she needed someone else to fill the void while I was gone. She wanted to stay married to me, but she also wanted the freedom to explore her desires with others. How could I accept that? How could I live with the idea of her being intimate with someone else while I was stuck halfway across the world, helpless to do anything about it? It wasn't just about sex. It wasn't just about the physical part of marriage. It was about trust, about respect, about the promises we had made to each other. And when Emily asked me to open up our marriage, it felt like she was asking me to betray those promises. It felt like she was asking me to accept a version of marriage that I didn't recognize. I needed space. I needed time to think. But Emily wasn't giving me that. She called me every day, texting me constantly, asking if I had made a decision yet, telling me how much she loved me, how much she missed me, how much she hoped I would understand. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I couldn't find it in myself to comfort her. How could I, when my heart was breaking? Every time I spoke to her, I could hear her pleading for me to accept her choice. She insisted that it wasn't about replacing me, that it wasn't about love, but about fulfillment. She promised that I would always be the one she came back to, that I would always be the love of her life. But how could I trust that? How could I trust her when she was asking for this? Every word she spoke felt like another layer of manipulation, another attempt to get me to accept something I knew deep down I couldn't. After a week of endless phone calls, messages, and sleepless nights, I finally made up my mind. I couldn't continue living like this. I couldn't continue living in a marriage where my wife was asking to share herself with someone else. I couldn't stay in a relationship where I was expected to simply accept that she needed something more than I could provide. I filed for divorce. When I told Emily, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had expected her to beg, to try one last time to convince me that this was the right decision. But she didn't. Instead, she started crying. The tears, though, were not for the marriage that was falling apart. They were for herself. She cried about how lonely she had been while I was away, how hard it had been to live in this half-life where I was there but not really there. She cried about how this had nothing to do with me, but with her own needs, her own desires. Her tears didn't move me anymore. I had heard them before, I had comforted her before, but now it felt like an empty performance. I didn't know who she was anymore. The woman I married wouldn't have asked for something like this. The woman I married wouldn't have discarded everything we had built just to satisfy a temporary need. And that woman wasn't here anymore. I had tried to understand her pain, tried to empathize with her loneliness, but I couldn't find it in myself to forgive her. She had chosen to hurt me. She had chosen to betray everything we had worked for, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer felt real. As I looked at her across the table, her face tear-streaked and desperate, I realized that there was nothing left to say. I was done. This wasn't just about her asking for an open marriage. It was about everything that had led up to this point. It was about the erosion of trust, the lack of respect, the selfishness that had come to define her actions. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, my voice calm, though inside I was screaming. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't respect our marriage. This is not what I signed up for, and I can't keep pretending that it is." I watched as she collapsed, sobbing into her hands, but I didn't move. I couldn't. The woman who had once been my partner, my confidant, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who was willing to tear everything apart for her own needs. The divorce process was drawn out, but I was resolute in my decision. Emily fought me at every turn. She tried to stall the proceedings, to change the terms, to convince me that we could still work things out. But I had already made up my mind. She tried to manipulate me during the legal process, using our shared history and our moments of vulnerability against me. She would remind me of the good times we had, the memories of the life we had built, and the dreams we had for the future. It was all too little, too late. I couldn't let her rewrite our story. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. Every time we went to court, I could see the cracks in her composure. She would cry, beg, plead with the judge for a chance to fix things. But none of it mattered. I had made my decision, I was moving on, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into thinking that I was the one making a mistake. Over time, Emily's behavior became more erratic. She would send me long, rambling messages, telling me how much she regretted what had happened. She would say that she had made a huge mistake, that she wanted to fix everything, that she wanted to go back to the way things were. But I knew better now. I couldn't trust her words. They meant nothing after everything she had done. One day, after a particularly heated court session, Emily came to me. She looked different, worn down, disheveled, like a shadow of the woman I once knew. She had lost weight, and her eyes were empty, hollow. She looked as if she had aged years in just a few months. She asked me for one last chance, promising that she would change, that she would never ask for an open marriage again. But I was done. "No, Emily," I said firmly. "This is over. You made your choice. You can't just undo everything you've done. It's too late for apologies." The divorce was final. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but also like a chapter of my life had been irreversibly closed. Emily had tried to fight me on everything, on the terms of the divorce, on the division of assets, but I was unyielding. I had learned the hard way that if I wanted to move on, I had to leave the past behind. As I settled into my new apartment, I found a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in months. I started reconnecting with myself, rediscovering things I had put aside during my marriage. I spent time with old friends, traveled to places I had always wanted to visit, and found solace in the things that made me happy. But the hardest part of all was learning to let go of the person I thought I knew. Emily wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with, and as much as I still cared for her, I couldn't let her hurt me anymore. Emily continued to reach out to me, sending messages of regret, asking for forgiveness, trying to make things right. But I had moved on. I had built a new life for myself, and I wasn't going to let her come back and destroy that. In the end, I learned that sometimes you have to let go of the people you love in order to find yourself again. And while it wasn't easy, it was the only way forward.